Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, January the 27th. It's 6 p.m. Remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded for public viewing and access. It'll be eventually posted online. You'll be able to go back and view this. With that, I am going to adopt the agenda. With that, though, I'd like to make have council adopt or modify the agenda to move item 4.6, 502 Sanatorium Road rezoning additional information to the front of the agenda. Given the amount of people we have here to talk about at the beginning of the agenda, so I do need council just to give me their consensus. So please note, clerk, we have consensus to move that to the front.
No issues to adopt the
Just to
agenda.
adopt the agenda with the agenda. Again, I'd like to cognizant of their time. So with that, I'll remind everyone there's conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. Sorry, everybody in favor?
Yeah.
Everybody in favor? Aye.
So Joe.
Okay.
Yep.
Remind everyone there's conflict of interest forms in the middle of the table. If you have a conflict, please fill it in and pass it into the clerk, stating any conflict that you may have. With that, we're going to move on to new business and move on to item 502, Sanatorium Road rezoning, additional information in the clerk's office.
Perfect. As council knows, on December 12th, during the special meeting, council considered first and second reading of the proposed bylaw to amend a parcel at the Civic 502 Sanatorium Road. At the meeting, council deferred a decision for first and second reading in requesting additional information from staff. We have some additional information this evening, which is essentially an outreach that was done to other municipalities in New Brunswick to supplement the report that was provided from Plan 360 as part of their process to bring the item to council as well as to the PRAC. We do have one, I guess, clarity that we'll stress again as a reminder for council is that at Committee of the Whole, we're not making any decisions on the matter. So this evening we are looking for direction as to whether or not council has the information that they need, or if they have a request for additional information from staff, then we would need some clarity as to what that information would be or would entail. Given the information that has been provided. As we discussed at that meeting on December 12th, there is a timeline from when the public notice is issued. So we need to make sure that we amend any schedules accordingly and make sure that we get the information within that time frame in order to meet those parameters in the Community Planning Act. So as is noted in the memo, the method that we use to reach out to other municipalities is to look on the Health Canada or the Government of Canada's license holders for micro cannabis cultivation facilities in New Brunswick. So there were a number of facilities there, not all of which have publicly available addresses, which makes it challenging sometimes to find the municipalities in which they are located. All of them that have addresses either mentioned or have the community names mentioned were the ones that we reached out to. So the municipalities were Maple Hills, Memramcook, which we did have information from at the last meeting that was mentioned as well, but is included, Quispamsis, Hanwell, Miramichi, Tantramar, Dieppe, and Grand Lake. So responses were provided from all but the municipality of Grand Lake, and they're included as part of the package. The essence, if we were to summarize it, is that there were limited to no concerns in these specific facilities for their micro cannabis cultivation operations. There were multiple that were not aware of the operations for a few different reasons. Some of them were in a similar situation as us, where their municipal boundaries were affected as part of local governance reform, or somewhere in areas that the zoning permitted it, which means that it was zoned what we would say as of right, which means that no rezoning process was required, in which case these generally are not facilities that would necessarily have their addresses published or promoted, which means that it's not necessarily something that they're well aware of. Where it is like this, where we had a rezoning process to go through. The one that did raise concern related to smell, we asked specifically on smell, parking, or general complaints. where they were located, but the one that did raise concerns on smell was Inquis-Pamsis. And when it was initially licensed, they had concerns because it was operating in an existing facility. And after the upgrading of ventilation systems in that particular facility or that particular building, they have not since had any complaints from the public. And as you'll note in the other responses, it's the case for the others. And the only other one that was different was the city of Miramichi. So they were not aware of one of them, but had processed two others within their municipal boundaries and clarified that those did not have concerns. Chances are the reason that they were aware of some but not others is because they have multiple license holders in the city. Not all of them are micro cultivation facilities. So we only reached out to micro cultivation facilities, not those that were doing exclusively processing or did not have the micro cannabis license specifically. So with that, we can answer any additional questions that you may have. Most of them, as you'll see, were provided via email. But we can speak if you want to the ones that called to provide the information. We put those in so I wouldn't forget what they said by the time we came back here. But at this point, we've provided this additional information, and if there is additional information that council would like to make a decision either in favor or against, we would need some sort of direction as to what that looks like to make sure that we can satisfy the requirements or the requests of council. So with that, can have questions, and there is a recommendation, which is just to direct us to bring it forward to the February meeting, the February 10th meeting, our regular council meeting in February for first and second reading. So the motion and then any questions on the matter.
Questions?
Motion first.
Motion
Yeah.
to.
I move that council refer the matter to the February 10th, 2025 regular meeting of council for first and second reading to be considered by council.
Moved by Deputy Bland, seconded by Councillor Beck. Questions?
I just want to, well, we can go through it. Can I make comment after the vote?
Yep.
Okay, we'll wait till after.
Still questions before we vote.
Well, it's more of a comment than a question, I guess. If I recall from the meeting that we had previously, bringing the matter to council on February the 10th seems to ignore the conversations that we had back in December the 9th, when we decided that there needed to be more discussion about if, where, and when possibly we determine where these types of businesses should be. We talked about, at least I know I brought up, and there didn't seem to be any disagreement about the need to look at the rural areas, just like we have the village. And we've spent so much time, I'm gonna repeat myself, sorry, all these last 2 years focusing on what we should be doing for the village, with not that there isn't direct and indirect benefit to the things we're doing in the village in the rural area. I would never say that, but we've done virtually no planning whatsoever in the rural area. And we need, in my mind, we should be making those types of plannings, having those planning sessions and determining where do we want an industrial park or an industrial area, as opposed to disparate. We're gonna put, we're gonna zone this as industrial and that is industrial and here is industrial.
Oh, yeah, I can remind Councillor Vittori that we did have a planning session to talk about consolidation of the plan
Of the plan.
and the longer term plan to look at zoning for our new municipality.
Right.
Unfortunately, will be a longer term initiative that could potentially take a couple of years to go through. So in this case, we are still going to have to make a decision in this singular instance, but that doesn't preclude in the future
Right.
to be doing exactly what council does want to do.
Right.
No question, we want to do that. Unfortunately, given the timelines and remind me about the timeline as far as when
6 months.
6 months, we will not have that runway to go through and do proper basically going through on zoning. for a municipal plan for the new community, so.
Well, I mean, I guess I would look at it from this perspective, and let me just finish some of the other things too, that we discussed getting residents more engaged. We have lots of residents here. I know that many of the residents continue even since that meeting. I've had a number of phone calls from residents, emails from residents. I understand Phyllis has had meetings and
I have emails, I have calls, I have meetings weekly on this issue, on this topic. So we need to, as a group, be
But
able
that's,
to.
but that's what the clerk's office has indicated. If you have the information and you have what you need on this situation, on what more do we need in this particular situation, on this particular parcel of land, in this particular request, we need to deal with this as a one-off. We can't look at the whole community of the 330 square kilometers today. Unfortunately, we're looking at this one instance right now, and I 100% agree. We have to look at, again, just for everybody in the audience, there were a municipal plan that was done for the village of Salisbury back 4 or 5 years ago, that clearly defined where we could put certain things. Prior to amalgamation, the province put forward what's called a Westmoreland Albert Rural Plan, which articulated what could be done in land uses in the rest of the rural areas in Westmoreland, Albert County. To change that, it has to go through a process that is long. We need to have public engagement. We certainly want to ensure we talk to all the public on what we want to have happen in the land. Many of you have indicated that you want certain areas to be residential, you want it to be agricultural, whatever you want it to be. We want to have those discussions. So we don't want to just make a decision on this big, huge community, because it is huge, 330 square kilometers versus the old community, it was 13. It was much easier to make those decisions on. So in this case, we've been tasked with talking about one parcel of land, one rezoning request, and I guess the question for the clerk's office is, given what they brought forward with the additional information, what additional information would you require going into this February the 10th meeting to make a decision? If you have enough to move forward on a decision, then we would vote tonight to move forward on it. If you don't have enough.
To move forward on bringing
Move forward to
it.
bring
Yeah.
it forward, no decision, but bringing it forward for a vote. If you need additional information of any kind, please articulate what that would be to allow you to make a decision.
Just to add on that too, even when the master plan, whatever we want to call it, the updated zoning is completed, people can and will still submit rezoning,
Well, and-
like applications, right?
well,
That's
and that's also my concern is this isn't a one-off. Because if this gets approved,
Mhm.
we're gonna have, I guarantee you, many more. I know one for sure.
Mhm.
Sure.
That's watching what's going to happen right now, and we're gonna have this all over again. And how many all over agains do we want to do this?
But I gotta get, Joe, what he's just indicated is, even when we go through this brand new municipal plan, somebody can still come forward with a rezoning request regardless.
For anything,
For
I'm not
anything,
meaning
for anything.
specific,
That is
Right.
yeah.
just, that is just democracy, and that is,
But not just but it's for
Right.
any business, any commercial enterprise has to rezone.
that's right.
So if you want any development whatsoever in River Glade, any business, any shop, any type of business at all, any small business, this has to be rezoned. That's just how it works. It has to be rezoned, commercial, industrial for a business, unless we're not having businesses in River Glade.
No, and I understand that. I don't have any objections to it. I guess I go back to what I said before. We're here as representatives of the residents. Right? If they could all, if it was technically possible that all 5,000 or 6,000 people who could vote in the town of Salisbury could vote on every single motion that we do, which we know it's not, that would be the most democratic thing that we can. But we have a whole bunch of people here and a whole bunch of people that are virtual and a whole bunch of other people who aren't even here, who are not very happy about this, that have told us this is not what they want. And we are their representatives. And that has to carry a lot of weight.
And so I think that,
But that's exactly what I'm saying, Joe. So what more do you need? If we're moving forward on.
I don't need any
Regardless of,
more
we have to
information.
have a vote on February the 10th, if like yea or nay, one way or the other. So on that, do you need any more information?
or you direct us to get the
Or
information
you
as we
direct
go
to
in
get the
February.
information.
Yeah.
So there's only one concern I have about February the 10th. And that is that the minutes for December the 9th have not yet been posted, and neither has the video. So if any of our residents even wanted to find out what happened on December the 9th, unless they were here, they have absolutely nothing to refer to.
So therefore, do you want to postpone till the March council meeting, or do you want to?
That's an easy one. Yeah. Yeah.
That's fine.
Because the minutes cannot be published until the next meeting, when there's an approval of those minutes. That's just, that is the way. the
Because that,
bylaws
that, that
work.
allows us to, and the council to, re-engage the community, at least from that perspective. And let them know, these were the minutes of the meeting from where we deferred the decision. And that if they want to have more to say, or want to reach out to councillors or mayor, they have the opportunity to do so. And they also have a much greater opportunity to plan if they want to come here on, in March than in just a short week and a bit.
No, that's fair, and that's why we're bringing it for that specific meeting, because the piece is from our perspective, the direction of the last meeting in terms of decision was that there
Right.
was no decision, we
Right,
needed
and
more
you needed
information.
you needed more information, so that's what I want to be very clear on tonight, as far as, public engagement is great, which we'll continue to do. We've been getting that's been, the public has been great as far as coming forward with that. But is there anything additional from council perspective that you need from the clerk's office in the meantime? We need to be very specific of their time, that we don't come back again in March to say you need something else.
I personally feel comfortable enough.
I feel comfortable.
Make a
enough,
decision. I feel comfortable enough to make. So do we, like, what's the process to do a friendly amendment for that?
So we're gonna have to wait till March the 10th,
The,
or March the.
yes,
Okay, March.
but that friendly amendment is fine, because it's the March meeting, yeah,
Well,
that's fine.
everybody agrees.
Yeah, so we don't need to amend the motion.
Okay.
We'll do it for the March meeting.
March the 9th.
I think it's also March tenth.
March 10th, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, March tenth.
As long as you both agree and everybody.
Right, so,
Yeah.
okay, with that,
Is there more though?
is there, but let's have a read around the room. Is there anything anybody else needs? I just want to go through and let's just do it. Is there anything else you need, Joe, besides getting additional public feedback?
Nope.
That's great.
Is there a way that we can do that? I'm not clear on the process of all of us getting the same things and how we inform each other, or if we all have separate meetings, if we invite people to come to the committee of the whole. That's just my,
Our
Well-
recommendation with anything is to always make sure the clerk's office has a copy,
Right,
because
copy.
those are
If
the,
you-
those are the
if you receive any
municipal
emails
records.
Similar to what
but-
we've all been receiving.
yeah, no, it's
Everyone
more,
here.
I get that process. I want people to feel heard and hear them and understand. And I don't know if there's a better way of us doing that in the future or not. I hear Joe, but I think that's something we should, maybe not for this. So the answer is, I don't need anything more for this. It's just more of I want to be able to see it and hear
And
it.
I think we've chatted about some things like enhanced notifications, that's the word in other municipalities, but looking at how we increase beyond the kind of minimum requirements. of
But when the
community
public
planning law.
consultation happens, in this room, we have to hire a hall somewhere that we can, so in other words, we want the place to be full. We want to have that engagement ahead of time.
Yeah.
We just need to find a way.
So for the record, for everyone that's listening, there's not going to be another public hearing on this.
No, that's right, that's
Right.
fine.
So
Right.
it's everyone's responsibility to make sure that they contact mayor, CAO, staff, Phyllis, Joe, John, Sarah, Nathan, Jason, and Stephanie, or to be heard. And this is very important.
And the public's been, kudos to the public. They've been, it's great to see everybody out here tonight, and that's what we want to have.
Yes,
It's great that all the feedback and the phone calls that we've been receiving, because again, we're residents the same as you all are. And again, we want to listen, that's our job, so.
Just as a side note, a story, I was talking to someone who called me yesterday. And one of the things that this person asked me is, well, do I have to go to the town website and Facebook site to find out what's going on? And I said, yes, you do. Instead of spending 2 hours on Facebook a week, if not more, spend 5 minutes every 2 weeks looking at the agenda. Even just looking at the agenda will tell you whether you need to have any concerns or not. If you don't want things to happen to you and you want to be a part of the process, you need to be engaged. And we do send out all kinds of notices on Facebook and all kinds of other things. I myself saw the notice for this, I don't know how many times. And I'm getting people calling me saying they just found out.
But all public meetings are posted in the newsletter, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's one of that's a really important tool. If you don't wanna have to go to the website, sign up for the newsletter.
Well, that's
Because every public
everybody in,
hearing is
everybody on
posted.
listen in video land and everybody in the gallery. We do have a newsletter that's distributed, so we certainly encourage everybody to sign up for that. And again, we do want to be a council that communicates. We want to be open, transparent about everything, so we can only get out there with people when we're constantly being barraged with information on a daily basis.
So I know for me, because this is in my ward, the people have spoken, like everyone has, we've been barraged with emails.
That's why I'll be
letters.
honest,
Like I could
I'm
vote on
ready
this
to go
tonight,
Next
but
week or the next meeting, but if we
So-
definitely want additional more, we can certainly do so, but I've heard enough personally to make a decision.
I think it's fair to wait though, I think for that,
Yeah.
yeah, because the minutes will be approved at our February meeting. To your point, we only approve them at regular council meetings. We have not had one since, like we mentioned to you, we haven't
Right.
had one since December. But special meetings, we don't approve minutes at those. And the videos, like I mentioned to you, it's me that usually does them, so I'm behind much further than December. But we're shifting those and we'll play catch up and we'll have them done by that meeting, so.
Okay, so with that, any additional questions? No additional questions, all in favor of direction to the clerk's office?
Aye.
Negative, no, so you've got your direction. All right. So with that, we'll move on to item 4.1. Welcome, Charlie. Okay, come on up to the podium, where, as I told you earlier, we're very informal, so for everybody in council, this is Charlie Burrell, and you can introduce yourself and tell us all what you're doing, all the great things you're doing on the work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I'm the founder of the Humanity Project. I started 10 years ago. I started by going out and making survival bags out of my house. I was driving down the street one day, and it was -34, and there was a gentleman. He was walking, he had no hat, no mittens. He was wearing a pair of sneakers. And I was driving by him in my car, and I clearly remember thinking like, oh my God, I gotta help that guy. He's freezing. And I drove past him. I drove past him not because I didn't want to help him. Drove past him just because simply I didn't know what to do at the time. So I just went home and I went on social media, basically said to my friends and family, I can't afford to help all these people, but I can't afford to do nothing. If you have book bags, you know, hand warmers, hats, mittens, stuff like that. And I ended up making 34 of these bags. And at the time, if someone had asked me, if I closed my eyes and somebody said homeless person, the first thing I pictured was a guy with a brown paper bag and a bottle pushing a shopping cart. And that was because society had told me that's what homelessness was. But as I started going out and finding people in banks and in the bushes and in the parks and stuff like that and under bridges, I quickly realized that society had lied to me. I found people sleeping in their cars with their kids. I found people that were seniors that were sleeping in banks. And I realized that homelessness wasn't a guy with a brown paper bag and a bottle. Homelessness was my brothers and my sisters. It was my aunts and uncles. It was people just like me. So from there, one summer, I got my phone exploded. So most of the people who are in town, or a lot of them who are on the streets, have my personal cell phone number. And one day my cell phone exploded, and the soup kitchen and the food bank both went on vacation for the same time for 2 weeks. And there was nowhere to eat. So I popped open tables in a parking lot with a couple volunteers. And we started feeding children and seniors and the homeless, and it started with 50 people. And we did that for 375 days. We moved from parking lot to parking lot. And there was a time in December, I'll never forget it, where it was a full-on blizzard. There was no, buses were off the roads. There was nobody out. And I was cooking out of my house and my parents' house, and my friends' houses, and we were all meeting up in this parking lot. And I remember we had a big pot of soup. We took the lid off, and the steam was just rolling out. And I was thinking to myself, like, I don't even know if the soup's gonna be hot by the time we get it in a bowl. I don't even know if anybody's gonna show up. Like, it's a full-on blizzard. And I remember seeing a senior walking down the main street, and he had a little walker, and he was pushing it, trying to get it through the snow. And there was a father with 2 kids that was pulling them over a snowbank. And that day in a full-on blizzard, we fed 126 people. And to me, that was the day where like the line was drawn in the snow, actually, where there was no stepping back, there was only going forward, and I knew we had to find a place. So we stayed out in that parking lot and kept serving people, and then, eventually, we, raised enough money that we bought a building downtown Moncton. And we used that to feed people. And during the winter, when it got cold, we would turn it into a shelter at night, and then in the morning we'd flip it back over to a dining hall service, and then at night flip it to a shelter. And we did that for 6 winters. As of today, with only volunteers, community support, our organization has fed over 700,000 meals to children, seniors, homeless, and working poor families in the community. We have helped 307 people who were homeless find safe, affordable housing. We've helped over 3,000 children have something under the Christmas tree, and as well as 21 other services that we provide at our downtown location. Now, as most of you know, as things in the province changed from alcohol, cocaine, and pills to meth and fentanyl, our community started to change as well. And I watched people die in our community, being ripped apart every day. We knew that feeding people and sheltering them wasn't gonna be enough. We took on the challenge of running a shelter, the largest shelter in the city. We would have between 80 to 120 people sleeping there a night, and from December 19th until June 30th, just myself, not the staff, not the volunteers, not the homeless, just myself, I had administered Narcan or CPR 87 times. I knew after someone's dead on the ground and they wake up and they look at you and they say, I need help, and nothing comes out of your mouth, I've never felt so helpless, because all the places for help were long waiting lists, 6, 8, 9 months, a year. And unfortunately, people die in that time. So again, with only community support and an idea, I went to some of my donors, some of my friends, some of my volunteers, and I told them this idea that I had about wanting to start a therapeutic community where people who are experiencing addiction or mental health issues could get the help they need to overcome their challenges. Because one of the challenges I seen was that if you have money, there's a list of rehabs you can go to. But if you have no money, there is nothing out there that is tailored to the homeless specifically. You know, a lot of the programs are 3 months, 6 months. I know I'm not taking 8 years of homelessness out of somebody in 3 months. That's never gonna happen. So eventually, this is why I think everything happens for a reason. So during COVID, we were feeding 200 to 300 people a day downtown. Our donations dropped by 67%. Because when we were going from red to yellow to orange, and people didn't know if they were working the next day, they stopped donating because they're struggling themselves. The problem with that is the number of people we started feeding started going higher and higher. And I started panicking in my head thinking, okay, like if we have a 2-month food supply and our numbers double, we're gonna be down to a month, and our donations are down, so I can't buy any new fruits or vegetables or pork. So what are we gonna do? So I just started thinking in my head, like, let's get an acre of land, start growing some vegetables. And the reason why I think everything happens for a reason is because this guy who I haven't talked to since high school never even said hi to me. He literally sent me a Facebook link for a farm that was for sale. And that was all he sent. And I looked at it and I went, whoa, I know that farm. I used to grow up down the road from it. I know exactly where that's at. So I got together with some donors and some friends and some supporters, and we went and looked at it, and I kind of just explained the idea of having a therapeutic community where people could get the help they need, but it could also double as a place to help grow food so that we could supply our downtown location and the people that need it. Next thing I know, a couple months later, we own a beautiful piece of property with 187 acres of land sitting out in the country. It's beautiful. And
Little River.
Little River, yeah. And the river wraps right around our property. It's absolutely beautiful. And since we've gotten it, last year was the first time our organization received government funding. We received funding from the city of Moncton in order to build 21 bunkhouses on our property. So those are basically like private bedrooms. Everyone has their own heating, cooling, their own mini fridge, bed, stuff like that. It's their own privacy and their own space. And then we received funding from the province for our doctors, our counselors, our staff, our addiction support, stuff like that. As of today, we have 24 guests currently living on the farm who have all been institutionalized from prison, homelessness, or were youths who had aged out of youth care facilities with no support. They've all been putting in the work to change their future. They all have a different plan, but they're on the same journey towards recovery and a brighter future. This Christmas was probably the most rewarding Christmas of my entire life. And the reason I say that is because this Christmas, we had 12 of our residents on our farm who spent it with their families. We have a lady who's been on the streets for 20 years, and this Christmas she spent it with her grandchild. And she said it was the most overwhelming experience she's ever had being around her whole family after that long, but she said it was the best day of her life. We have 3 residents who just celebrated a year of sobriety. We have 2 more yesterday who just did. We have another lady next week, 1 more 2 weeks after that. We have another couple like a month after that. So everybody on our farm has between a year and a week and a half in. So the plan is, for us, is to keep expanding and keep going. I know myself, after housing a lot of people and working with a lot of people who have had their issues, whether it be addiction, mental health, whatever. When we bring them to the firm, the reason we have the bunkhouses is simply this. Like I said, I'm not gonna take 8 years of homelessness out of somebody in 3 months or 6 months. It's not gonna happen. I have a guy that I moved in on December 19th. 4 days later, he comes to me and he says, Charlie, it was cold in my bunk last night. I said, it was cold in your bunk. He goes, yeah. He said, I got my hat, my mittens on. He's like, I put my snow pants, my jacket. He's like, I got all bundled up. I rolled up under the blankets like a burrito. He goes, I laid there for 20 to 30 minutes and then I realized I had heat. He goes, I got up and turned that heater on because it was the first night I slept in my underwear in 7 years. Now, here's the thing. He didn't lay there for 20 to 30 minutes before he realized he had heat. He laid there for 4 days. It was only in those last 20 to 30 minutes he realized he had heat because after 8 years of being outside, his first instincts are bundling up. It's not, I have a heater to turn on. You know, we have a girl that when we moved her in, she barricaded her door every night when she went to sleep for 3 weeks. Because when she tells me this, she tells me like, I barricaded my door. And I was like, that's okay, no worry. She's like, listen, I stayed at your shelters. She's like, I have a lock on my door. I know everybody here. She's like, and I knew I was safe at your shelter. She's like, but every night when I went to sleep on the streets, I always had to barricade my spot to make sure I wasn't raped or robbed or something happened. And I said, that's okay, don't worry about it. She goes, no, I'm telling you, because last night was the first night I never did it. She goes, I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing it. She goes, I'm trying here. She goes, but I know it's in my head and it's something I need to overcome. So for us, getting somebody off drugs, getting them clean and sober, to me, that's the easy part. I can tie you in that chair and get you off drugs. But for us, it's getting them out of survival mode and then teaching them how to live again. We have a gentleman on our farm who has a year sober. He's been working for 3 months now. He's got a job, full-time job. And our staff at night picks him up, drives him back to the farm, and in the morning they drive him out to work. And he's looking for an apartment right now. And I know even if he got clean and sober, I'll tell you this. If we just got him clean and sober and I put him back and I said, here's a job, have at it, he'd be back on our streets in not very long. Because he hasn't dealt with the issues that were holding him back from drinking. And like during COVID, he was drinking hand sanitizer. And during COVID, hand sanitizer was like an open bar. It was everywhere. So for him, it was so accessible, but it was like making his problem worse and worse and worse. 80% of the people that are on our farm have some form of childhood trauma, whether it be from sexual, mental, or physical abuse. You know, when you get down to the core of what's caused their addiction and what kept them in addiction or what kept them in homelessness for so long, it is trauma. So for us, the reason why that property is perfect for us is because it's away from everything in town. It is serene. They can swim in the river, they can fish in the river. The eagles are flying by, you know, we got lots of farm animals, and it's the atmosphere, and it's the perfect atmosphere to recover and to get your life back together. So the reason I'm here today is I wanted to invite all of you out to our farm because I would love nothing more for you to come and see it yourselves. Talk to the residents that are there and see what's happening in your community. You guys have any questions? Open to anything.
Well, this is great, and I can't wait to come and visit. Those things that every now and then keeps coming back to my mind, and maybe, like you said, there's a reason why I haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to it. But one of the things I'm curious about, because I have my daughter who's is a nurse in Emerge, is like, what resources do you have to help these people, like professional resources? And where do you get them from? And I just so fascinated when when I think about how difficult it is. I don't have a family doctor and can't get one.
So for us, so where I've been lucky is that 10 years of running an organization with only volunteers, I have met a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life. So we have a psychiatrist, we have nurses, we have paramedics that work at the farm, we have counselors, we've covered our bases from basically 10 years of building it up and then having shelters and having certain people at the shelters that were really good and going, okay, well, when we get the farm going, do you wanna go? Yep, 100%. And then getting them on board. So I know like finding doctors, nurses and stuff like that has been difficult for a lot of people. There's a lot of people without a family doctor. But for us, I've kind of lucked out in the fact that through community and doing this for so long, I've met a lot of different people. And then when it was time to start the farm up, they were all on board.
That's great. That's so important.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, because like I said, it's trauma, like the psychiatrist, you know, it's good for them to sit and talk to somebody and a professional, because they have some deep rooted trauma, some of them, you know, it's a lot of issues that they're overcoming. And that's why, like, for me, I can't put a time limit on it. Whether, like, my goal, personally, my goal is when someone leaves our farm, they don't ever return back to a shelter or to our streets. You know, I'd rather take 2 years, 5 years, I don't care, to set somebody up, because when you talk to a lot of the people, you find out like they didn't have the same family supports that I was lucky enough to have when I was growing up, you know, like they didn't have the best parents, some of them. So it's like, you kind of have to teach them how to relive. And to do that, you need a good, strong team of people around you to make it happen.
This psychiatrist that he's talking about is committed, because I was there on a storm day. It was a storm morning. And we had a tour going on. We had a couple of people from Moncton out to see it. And when we were getting ready to leave, he was coming in and Charlie said, Phyllis, he's here. This is our psychiatrist. So he drove out from Moncton. It was storming. It's just incredible to see how the people have rallied to commit to the program.
Because it's important.
Yeah.
Charlie, you mentioned, and I'm familiar with the funding, have you got any assurances from an ongoing perspective from the province? Because obviously
Yeah.
you received initial, but.
Yeah,
as
so the
you-
province is funding it. That's no issue. The next step for us is like, so. Tell you this, so for every person I've ever met that was experiencing homelessness, their issues for being homeless were as unique as the individual themselves. So for some people, we bring them to the farm and it's like, I need to take a hot shower. Holy cow, can't wait. Some other people, it's like drowning a cat underwater, because they literally have been sleeping under a bridge for 5 years and a shower so foreign. It's like their cooking skills. They're so used to eating at our place or other places downtown that their basic cooking skills are just taking peanut butter, putting it on bread and putting it in their mouth. So what we do is when they're on the farm and they're in the bunkhouses, we get their basic skills up to par. Can you know how to do your laundry? Because some of them haven't done laundry in years. You know how to keep your room clean, keep yourself clean. Can you cook a meal? Can you just do the basic things that most of us take for granted, right?
Mhm.
And then once they do that, our next step of the project is going to be the big building that we have on the property. I want to put 14 apartments in there. The reason being is because, like I was saying earlier, we have a lot of people that are now talking to their kids, seeing their kids. They go for family visits off with their kids for the night or whatever. And it would be nice that once they have their basic skills under control, we move them into an apartment. So the idea is that when they move out of that apartment and you move them into Moncton or Salisbury or Hillsborough or wherever they're living, and you give them an apartment, it's not foreign to them. They're not laying in a bed with their snow pants on and a jacket because they don't know how to use the heater. You know, you don't have to worry about them not being able to cook themselves a meal. Because that's again, just those, like, learn how to cook a meal is a reason why a lot of people eat at our place. They don't have the skills to cook their own meals, you know, so if you can teach them how to cook, and when they are out on their own, then they're not using the other services, the food banks, stuff like that.
So, thank you. Any additional questions?
I just think it's a beautiful thing, what you're doing.
Well,
I
thank you.
know, when it first came out, I'm gonna try not to cry, so I'm trying not to cry when you're talking, but, very personal to me. Very personal, close family member. I said I could see this being the future for her and not having anywhere for her to go. So I was very, very happy that you brought it here.
Thank you.
Charlie, so do we call you directly to make an appointment?
Yeah.
Should we as a council do it? I don't know.
Yeah, call me or
Find a time.
Phyllis has my number, you can get ahold of me.
I think we should all go out together. Should do like a field trip.
Yeah. And I'd love for you guys to, because that's the thing, like, you can look at pictures on Facebook, you can hear me talk, but until you're standing there and you hear the goats going and they're driving you nuts, you don't have an understanding of what's really going on there, right? So when you're actually, because that's the one thing I get from everybody that comes out there. They're like, okay, I've seen pictures, I kind of heard what you're doing, but I had no idea until I came out here. And once they come out and you talk to the residents and you see, and you get a kind of a first-hand perspective, it gives you a much greater idea of what we're trying to do. You know, like, I know. So I'll tell you this, before it was announced in the public that we had purchased the farm, I had gone 2 kilometers around the farm to every neighbor, and I went and met with them. And if they weren't home, I left them an information sheet with my name, my personal number, everything on there. Because the one thing I didn't want to happen, I grew up down the road from the farm, like 10 kilometers in Turtle Creek. So the one thing I didn't want is it to hit the news that we bought the farm and we were turning into rehab, and people started going, oh my God, he's gonna move a bunch of homeless people in my backyard, and there's gonna be a tent city, and start freaking out, right? So I went and explained to my neighbors the plan. We have been there for over 3 years, and we have no issues with any of the neighbors. One of our neighbors cooks us supper every week. Yeah, she brings us down, like, I mean, a meal every week. Like, she's like, how many residents you got there? Do they like this? And then she'll come down with like a smorgasbord of a meal, like dessert and everything, weekly. And then our other neighbor, he's like, I'll do your driveway if you need help. And he's always been super helpful until we got our own tractor and stuff. But like, I've never wanted to be there for it to be a hindrance on anybody that's lived there for 20 to 30 years. You know, I wouldn't want somebody moving something disastrous into my backyard. That's why right from the start, I've always said, I will never take more people on that farm than we have the resources to handle correctly. Because if we don't have the resources, I'm not taking more people. If our resources grow and we can keep doing it, then I'll keep helping more people. But my plan is personally, I know my time on this earth is limited like all of you. When I am gone, I want that farm to be self-sustainable and to be helping people for the next 50, 60 years. That's my plan.
On behalf of council, Charlie, I just want to thank you for all you're doing.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm very sad of what you're doing. For coming to leave.
Thank you very much for having me here today, and I look forward to seeing you guys all out at the farm.
The next question when we go and visit will be, how can we help you?
Awesome.
Which we'll chat about in the future.
Awesome. Thank you for your
Thank
time,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Same problems.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4.2, updated traffic bylaw.
So I'll give a bit of an intro and then we can pass it over to Brad if there's any questions. As council knows, at committee of the whole in November, I think it was. We came to council to get some direction on a number of different bylaws. Traffic was one of them. At the time, the bylaw itself was not drafted. It was more so getting direction on it. And so now it is finalized and ready to be proposed for first and second reading at an upcoming meeting. The main piece that we were looking for direction on was as it relates to event parking. We spoke about at that meeting in November, in particular for events near the park. The remainder is essentially carryover items from the former village boundaries. And then given the jurisdiction of the province versus the town over streets, this applies primarily over the former village boundaries, given those are the streets that we have jurisdiction over. So the bylaw is drafted in full and in the package. And we're happy to answer any questions that there may be. And the motion is essentially to refer it to the February meeting.
I move that council direct staff to bring the bylaw titled A Bylaw of the Municipality of Salisbury relating to traffic as drafted for first, second reading at a future council meeting.
Second it.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dunn, seconded by Councilor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
So the list of streets that are in there, like, do we have to amend this bylaw every time there's a new street?
Yeah, we're still getting clarity on those, in particular because some of them are provincial streets. So the bylaw that's drafted might come back with a revision to that, but yes, it would have to be revised, but just the schedule.
Okay.
Yeah,
So like not a first and second reading, just a.
right.
Okay.
Additional
Right.
questions? Counselor Lewis?
Seriously.
No additional questions. All in favor of the motion? Contrary minded? You have your direction to move it forward to the February meeting. We'll move on to item 4.3, updated noise bylaws.
So similar to the last one, this one was one that was discussed in November or whenever that meeting was, I think November. Is being proposed, drafted in full, in the package for consideration for first and second reading at an upcoming meeting of council. I think in the last package, we didn't include the actual document, so, there's some elements that will highlight that were in the initial version that weren't necessarily visible to council based on the fact that it was in the package, but some of the items that we highlighted at the last meeting were around both exceptions and exemptions. So exceptions, being items that are not included as part of what would be considered a disturbance or a nuisance as it relates to noise. We spoke about agriculture as an example, so that is automatically excluded. But then there's also exemptions, which are on a case-by-case basis. At the time at council, council also asked as to whether or not it's standard practice for municipalities to have the council of the municipality actually grant the exemptions, which it is standard practice based on our review of others. There is an option to have them reviewed internally, but given they are rare, our recommendation remains to have that exemption process come to the council table. We discussed some of the time, so initially it would have included the time of 10 p.m. on the earlier time into the morning. We've adjusted that to 11 with the exception of construction from 9 to 7. And again, there's the standard exemption processes. And the other element that was discussed was around looking at a potential approach for zoning like we did for fire. The reason that we're not recommending doing that is based on the fact that in the case of a fire prevention bylaw, and in that case, it was essentially bonfire pits. The fire prevention or fire safety approach to that is that if you're in an area that has more density closer to buildings, the more important it is to have more safety precautions in place as it relates to bonfires. Whereas noise, if it meets in the rare instance where something were to meet the disturbance levels in a noise bylaw, it's a disturbance regardless of the zone that you're in. So that's the argument and the reason that recommendation remains. And those were the elements that were discussed at the committee of the whole meeting. Mostly the time that has been switched. So with that, similar to the last item, there's a recommendation to bring it forward to a future council meeting and then can answer any questions.
I'll move that council approve the bylaw as drafted in principle and direct staff to bring it to an upcoming meeting of council for first and second reading.
I'll second it.
So moved by Councilor Colwell, seconded by Councilor Oblinus. Questions for the motion?
I will just say, I owed you that because I asked the most questions the last. That's very good. Very well done.
How much effort do you anticipate in policing this bylaw?
That's a difficult question, it's like, you know, how much snow are we gonna get next Thursday?
In other words, I don't know.
Tell us that.
Yeah. As I always said when I took on this role, the biggest thing is education. You know, having a conversation with people to basically understand the reason behind the bylaws that we make and create and move forward. I'm not one to always have a ticket book in hand to implement any fines, but I think the biggest thing is cooperation and conversation and education at that point. I don't think it's going to be an issue as we look at it now. But moving forward, we'll just have to adjust when if an issue arises, and we'll have to discuss it at that point. But from what I see, based on the other two newly bylaws that we passed, I haven't had any major issues for sure.
Thank you. Additional questions? No additional questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded? So clerk's office has their direction and look forward to council meeting.
Great job, Brad.
Easy.
Like, these are
Brad.
incredibly thorough.
And if you get back to us on Thursday's weather, we'd like to know that, please.
We'll work on that.
That's Trevor. I asked Trevor for the weather.
Trevor.
Trevor Cindy Day.
That's true. With that, we can move on to item number 4.4, NB Power Camera Pilot Program.
So as council will recall, in early 2024, we determined that we would go as part of an MB Power pilot program to install two cameras, streetlight cameras, they call them. They were installed last year. The pilot was intended to run about 6 months. We've been running it since about mid last year, based on the time that they've been installed. At which point we committed to coming back to council to determine if it's something that we would proceed with. At this point, our recommendation is to not, for a few different reasons, mainly the fact that, the resolution is not super clear if they're ever used. Ultimately, we were requested to use them, or to access the footage on 2 occasions, one of which was for the purposes of an RCMP investigation, and the second was for the purposes of an RTIPA request. So those were the two rationales for accessing footage since their installation. And we included photos of what it looks like, so you can see. MB Power is mentioning that there are upgrades, but no timeline as to what that would look like. But at this point, our recommendation is that we did the pilot, and the pilot that's the purpose of a pilot, to see if it's worthwhile. And at this point, our recommendation is to cease having those at this particular time. So with that, there's a motion, and then we can answer any questions there may be.
Councilor Linus?
I'll move that Salisbury Town Council direct staff to opt out of the NB Power camera pilot.
Moved by Councilor Linus, seconded by Councilor Bannister. Questions to the motion?
One question, when I was looking at the picture, my first reaction was, that looks pretty clear, after I read that it wasn't. And so I guess the other question I have is, is it like, if you want to zoom in, it becomes unclear?
Yeah, that's the clearest it gets, like when you,
Okay,
The closer you get, then it just.
then it becomes, okay, well, now I get it.
yeah, so for the purposes of, like in the case of,
Identifying a person.
if the RCMP were to need it can, I think in the situation they needed it for, it validated information that they had, but if they needed to find a license plate, they're not getting it from that.
Okay.
It's not useful and costs us money, let's get rid of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically.
And we, like, when we installed them as part of the pilot program, we consulted the RCMP on where it would be beneficial for us to have and to install them. And with the intent of them being able to access it as needed. Other municipalities use them in parks, for example, instead of security cameras. So those could work in certain places, but given the intended use of our participation in the pilot, it's not quite, once you zoom in, there's nothing there.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Any additional questions? No additional questions. With that, let's make a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary minded? You have your direction. So with that, we'll move on to item 4.5, Residential Development Incentive Program.
So as council knows, last year we engaged Stantec Consulting to assist us with this eventual or proposed program, being a residential development incentive grant or residential incentive policy, or residential development incentive policy. And throughout the last year, they undertook a literature review, essentially looking at other municipalities of comparable size in terms of what they are doing to incentivize residential housing. They had a focus group with developers or potential developers in terms of what some of the hindrances are to residential development for them, and then ultimately proposed a program. It was presented in draft form last year to council. This is essentially the formalized or finalized version with the final report from Stantec put into town policy format, including the application process and application form that we're looking for final direction on. And then if we were to get final direction this evening, then it would come forward at a future council meeting depending on what that direction may be, could be February or afterwards, at which point it will be rolled out, given the fact that council has budgeted for funds, to start implementing this program as a pilot project in 2025. So with that, there's a motion, and then can answer any specifics that council may have.
I move that council approve the Town of Salisbury Residential Development Incentive Program as drafted and direct administration to bring it forward for ratification at the February regular council meeting.
Moved by Councillor Bannister, seconded by Councillor Blinas. Questions to the motion?
I don't have a question or a concern. Just seems like reading through the different components of the plan, that it's very possible that we could chew through that funding very quickly on one project or.
Yep.
So are our numbers too big, or are they just gonna be limited reach that we can use it for?
Yeah, and so when we mentioned it the last meeting, the elements that we added were that there are max or there's caps. And the reality of when you're getting the larger projects, when you're getting when you're cost sharing essentially 25% of municipal infrastructure, there's a limit there. But that's what would eat up the project as opposed to the funding as opposed to the one-offs. And there's a way that it caps per project. So that can be per subdivision. And then if at a certain point the funding's not exhausted, there's a mechanism to consider essentially top-ups for those projects, but fully expect to exhaust the funding that's budgeted
Yeah, I think-
on a regular annual cycle.
So I remember correctly that was in essence almost a positive in that means development is happening.
Yeah.
And then we would then have to look at future budget cycles on, again, after the pilot. Do we continue to move forward and do we have to increase budgets on that? If it's successful. So,
And it gives us opportunities to stack funding too,
Yeah.
right? Like there's some that from a development perspective would not be eligible for funding when the municipality is a partner in the project and then becomes eligible for funding. So in a hypothetical scenario, I think it would be a dream world for the municipality. We could say that in our case, in New Brunswick, it's RDC that has the housing funding. They can cover a portion of it. So let's say it's 50%. Then you can do double the amount of projects hypothetically, right? So there's not all of them meet RDC's requirements that might meet ours, so we would always have conversations with them because they won't fund the program, but they'll fund on a project by project basis, so we're in conversations with them on some of the projects that we know we anticipate getting applications on for the first year, and then as we roll out the program, we'll look at the number for next year and say, based on the applications we got, or the interest, or the commitments that we made this year for next fiscal year, then we'll adjust accordingly.
I have a quick question. So this is for residential. Can we expect something to be trailing with, in regards to commercial?
So the right now for that funding piece, that's where the funding is right now, is the residential side, so it lets us leverage that. A lot of municipalities, if you look in the literature review and like the nitty-gritty details, they'll have that. They'll either top up the funding if it's mixed use, so if there's commercial and residential. So the intent for this one, the scope for Stantec was to look at residential, but I would say that it's gonna be part of the conversations to say, where do we go on the commercial side? What does that
So
look like?
does a multi-residential unit get classified as commercial or residential?
Residential,
Okay,
yeah, residential, yeah.
perfect.
good question.
Mhm.
Having a program like this, does that also allow us a better opportunity with our housing accelerator fund application?
This was one of the proposed action items in said application that we're doing any piece. So back to the funding piece, that was supposed to fund the program, was if we were successful in that. And they still haven't given the decisions or the determinations in the second round, which they were supposed to do in the fall. And then the minister changed, so I assume that will also cause.
Fingers
So-
crossed, we're gonna get some.
Yes, that's the hope, that's the hope. But yeah, it won't necessarily affect the decision now because it was part of in the first round, it was part of the proposed action items and it is for the second as well.
Additional questions? No additional questions, all in favor? Contrary minded? Have your direction to bring that forward to next. So with that, we are going to move on to item number 5, closed session land, 68(1)B Local Governance Act. Unfortunately for all of, I love having a full house. We don't normally get this. It's great to have people out participating, but unfortunately, part of the Local Governance Act, we have to talk about things like legal or land. We do that in closed, and unfortunately, you can't stay. You're welcome to wait outside, and we can wave you back in a little bit later, but this is the last item that we chatting about tonight. It is enclosed, unfortunately.
We need a motion to go in.
And I'll need a motion to enter into closed. So moved by Councilor Venus, seconded by Councilor Detory. Questions to the motion? All in favor? Not reminded, we're going to close. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. We have now returned to the regular committee of the whole meeting. With that, mayor and councilor statements / inquiries, item number 6. I have nothing to report. Council have anything forward.
I have one question. So I just want to get some thoughts on this. So an issue came up with a couple of the residents because there were logging trucks going up Coverdale Road and like going really fast. So,
CMP.
well, I guess here's, and that's what the, just where the question was.
No,
So when I reached out to Austin, because I thought, okay, well, you know, how do we maybe get in touch with the company, or is there some other way of getting in touch with these guys? It was, and he provided the link and where to go and provide all that information. So part of me was thinking, you know, under normal circumstances, if it was some guy who's going up Coverdale Road, and I don't think it's something that the town needs to get involved in. But then I thought about it a little bit more and I said, well, let's ask this question. What if we had a bunch of logging trucks that are going down Main Street really, really fast here in the middle of the village? And people complain, would we give them the same information, or would we feel like maybe we should do something about this because there's a huge risk here. It's not just one guy who is, driving too fast. It's
Fair
a
enough,
company
fair
who's
enough, but
logging trucks.
Well, yeah,
You're bordering on vigilante.
We have had that happen. We've indicated we need time of day, we need the information on the truck. We can report generalities.
Yes, and that's
Which
what I
we've
mean.
done, which we've
Okay.
done. But then again, similar to lawn tractor driving up and down this street or doing whatever, we still have to have individuals call the RCMP or the public or Department of Public Safety.
RCMP will enforce the
Yeah.
speed,
And then
Justice and
Department-
Public Safety will
Right.
enforce speed, but also the
Right.
commercial
People
vehicle
that have
side.
to- we have to work together on that, letting them know it's occurring, no
Right.
question. But I do think that we have to still be very careful with the public around not ensuring that they don't just throw it to us 2 weeks later on something and make generalities. So that it needs to be reported real time to these groups, otherwise it's never gonna get solved.
And I understand getting the specifics, but I guess part of me sits back and thinks, well, we probably know who these logging trucks are. It's not like there's whole, like, it's like,
Oh, no, okay.
Uh,
So the individual that reported it to us, as an example, really great person, they were nice about it. But they could have equally gotten the details of the truck, the company name, and reported it. Because we didn't physically see it. And we don't have cameras, so we don't have cameras on that road to get that information.
you don't have enough cameras.
when you
Or-
say reported it to 911, is that what you're saying?
For Department
For Department of Transportation?
So regardless of it, it is our responsibility to advocate for and work with those groups to do so. That's even with the signage that we've talked about, whether it be radar signs that would at least give the time of day that this type of occurrences are happening, so that the RCMP or the Department of Public Safety can set up checks. But they're like anything with such a huge territory, because it's not just that road, it's the Salisbury Road, it's if you go down the Sanatorium Road.
Sanatorium Road
You're
is.
seeing the same thing.
Crazy.
So they can't be in all places, unfortunately, but with this, we need the public's help, no different than break-ins or anything else to report it. So then they'll get consistent patterns. So if it's a logging truck, the odds are it's happening, I could be wrong. Chances are it's happening probably the same periods of time. So I do agree, we can report it, but no different than whether there's a pothole in a road. If they continue to report it to us and they're not taking it on themselves, there's power in numbers. So Like cause I responded back to the resident as well. If we have 100 residents that are all reporting that they have logging trucks that are going down that road doing that, the power in numbers that we're getting that constant public swelling that's happening as opposed to, and I remembered in Park and Larson when people were talking about people speeding through that subdivision. Well, I remember one resident's interpretation of what 50 was and another resident's interpretation of what 50 was. And person drove through and driving the speed limit and had people later saying that they were flying through doing 80. And they weren't. They were really doing the speed limit. And by that, it's one person's interpretation. So I think we have to have, from a public perspective, make the awareness. So that number that, an email that we provided, I think we have to make that fully aware to the public.
Oh,
We're
I
good.
don't disagree with that. I guess I just look at it and say, it's a logging truck. It's got tons of logs on it. It's heavy. When you're driving up south on the road, as you guys all know, it's pretty narrow. You know, it's got, you know, there's gravel on the one side. If you go too far.
Yeah.
You could, you know, it's not gonna be an accident with one person. If it's if it gets one or more tire on the road, it could be a big accident. I guess my thinking is eventually someone's gonna look into it. Potentially, we might be asked about it. And if it gets to that point, and I'm thinking about it from a risk perspective, based on my previous role many years ago, was I don't want to have to say, well, I gave him a number. Because that just from a public perception, it feels like we passed the buck.
No, but on that, Joe, we indicated that we would talk to the RCMP, which
Okay.
which we're going to do. So we're not passing the bucket.
But the
And
RCMP will always say, out of
Right.
this in public safety,
Right.
they need to call to make a
Right.
complaint.
And that's the thing, in unison, we have to work together on everything. We have to work together. Because otherwise, we will end up being the conduit for all complaints
Yeah.
for everything, for people not getting a doctor or people getting whatever. So
Hangnails,
what's that?
hangnails.
Yeah, and I looked at it from a severity of the
I agree.
situation. Yeah.
It's not a good thing. But again, on that, and again, I'm not saying the resident is right or wrong. I'm saying that's what public safety is for and the RCMP on. Is the truck truly speeding? Or is it the truck bouncing up and down at 75, which appears to be faster, which I don't know, right?
See, there's no evidence to support one or the other. The
That's
only
my
way to do
point.
that is dash cam.
That's why us saying it's happening, it's a broad statement. Trucks are going up and down, the Coverdale Road.
And they
But
go
what-
where the trees are.
but what
They're
time
gonna
are
have
they
to go
going?
up and down the road.
So what
Oh, yeah,
time
for
are they
sure, I
going
get
up and down
that.
the road?
I didn't have any problems with them going down the road.
Maybe one of the things we could ask for is DOT, like the Department of Transportation Public Safety, for some of their metrics. We get the RCMP numbers, or we get them.
We've been asking for those for.
Yeah,
But that's something we could continue, because then if we continue to see an influx of calls in certain areas, and just like the RCMP numbers and the fire calls and things, and that's something we
Being
look
public
at to
safety?
see if there's things
yeah.
people recommend we do as
Yeah.
a municipality.
I'm not sure the public knows per se to call public safety
No, they don't.
in these situations.
They don't.
Then maybe
George
that's
point.
a bulletin we can put.
That's what I mean.
And I put it on
think-
my Facebook page to say, you know, if you see this, this is the number to call.
You are amazing, Joe. You really are. No, I'm serious.
But I think
That's
a-
great.
that's-
Communication is awesome.
That's what
We
we
could
can
put it in the newsletter too.
But both truckers all have communication as well. And once they hear DOTs in the area, they all know to slow down.
And you know what? That's okay. If they slow down, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like it.
Well, yeah, then the problem's solved. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just have to have DOT around or the RCMP around all the time. That's not viable.
I think we all agree that safety is important. We now have
Yes.
law enforcement, we've got that relationship with the RCMP and all that stuff. I think, Joe, like what we could do though is, like I said, just kind of look at numbers. If they'll give them to us, if they won't, make it public that they won't, and keep asking for it and
Mhm.
keep doing what we're doing and.
I mean, even if you look at it from, look from the owner's perspective, right? Do I have a cowboy out there that's driving too fast? And do I want to run the risk that this person gets in an accident and kills a kid that was on a bike? And now the reputational and operational and financial things that I have to go through. I can tell you, if I was a business owner and someone said to me, look, I think your guys are driving too fast down Coverdale Road, I'd be going down to my operations manager and saying, look, you need to talk to these guys. They may not be, but people are watching. Just let them know that, you know what? That, you know, they need to be especially careful because I don't want to have to deal with this. And I would have it on record that I went and I had somebody talk to these guys. So if someone came to me and something bad happened, well, it's not good enough anymore to say, well, I don't know.
I-
You know,
I think you as a resident can do, if you want to do it for them, you can. I like if
But
they're
they'll-
passionate about.
But they'll
something,
come back and ask.
Come
then
back
I'm
and ask the
saying
individual,
As an individual, he can, but.
but he won't know any of the, unless. the
I
individual-
sent a note
What
to,
I'm saying is he's also a resident,
yeah.
not just a counselor.
Yeah, and I
So if
did.
He feels that way about it himself, and if you wanna call them for them, you can. Right?
anyway, I sent them a note, the same, I've not received any reply, but I likely not going to.
To the
but
company?
To the Department of
Oh,
Public safety.
Public Safety.
I mean, it's like anything, they need details, they do.
yeah.
Time, who's, it's broad generalities, that's the challenge. We get that constantly on Main Street, people are speeding up and down Main Street. But, like, who's speeding up and down Main Street, when is it happening?
Anyway, I
I
appreciate
have
the
to say,
conversation.
I meet the
Part of me
police
is like,
all the time, so I don't know if I have a magnet. But I mean,
I think it's your vehicle. They know it.
they're
Here
not
she comes.
following me.
They're following you to know you're speeding.
I appreciate that. Safety is very important, and that
It is.
road is all the roads are dangerous, and I think we need to try to get numbers from these organizations that aren't giving them to us and just keep
What
advocating,
numbers, sir?
like calls that they're getting for
Okay.
speed, like the commercial vehicles.
So you mean Justice and Public Safety, you said DOT, right? So when I said we've been
I'm
trying,
thinking DOT, I'm thinking 25 years ago.
Yeah, so it was like
DOT,
we-
But yes, public.
we
safety.
try to get theirs from DTI, but from Public Safety, Justice and Public Safety, we can certainly
Yeah,
ask.
I think
them.
that's the missing link, right, is we now have a good look at the numbers of our RCMP, if we did a big push on getting people to call. they're
They do a
now-
great job, they do a great job with the presentation. It'd be
They
nice to
do an
have something.
excellent job.
Right, so
Yeah.
I think that's that, that would be helpful.
And I think in our newsletter, putting that additional information to.
Yeah.
to Contact and
Who would contact?
when to contact, what, we should ask what details they need, I'm assuming they want time. And any information they have on vehicle, but. I don't think people are not probably looking at the vehicle that closely.
Well, yeah.
Observe and report.
Mhm.
anyway, thank you.
Additional items? No additional items, do I have a
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn, Councilor Lenis? Councilor Bannister was. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Approved.